In many polygamous families, the battles don't begin with the wives. They begin with the children born into rival camps, raised on old grudges, and taught to see their own blood as enemies. She learned this before she learned her letters. Her earliest memories were of hushed arguments behind thin walls, her mother's muffled sobs, her father's tired voice, and the low, sharp tone of the other wife somewhere in the background. The compound her father built had two identical houses facing other, separated by a courtyard that felt more like a battlefield than a home. She belonged to the house on the left. Sarah belonged to the house on the right. They shared a father, but that was where the sharing stopped. From the time they could walk, they were given different plates, different cups, different rules. If she wandered too close to the other side, her mother would snap, "Come back here. You have no business there." If Sarah crossed the invisible line between the two houses, her mother would pull her back with a hard grip and mutter something about those people under her breath. Yet children are born curious, not hateful. When she was 7, she slipped out one evening just before sunset, following the smell of roasting corn and the sound of laughter. She found Sarah sitting on the low wall that separated their houses, swinging her legs and biting into a hot cob, butter running down her fingers. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, two girls with the same father's eyes and the same stubborn tilt of the chin. "Do you want?" Sarah asked suddenly, holding out the half-eaten corn. She hesitated. Her mother's warnings echoed in her head, but the smell was too tempting, and the girl beside her didn't look like an enemy. She stepped closer and took a bite, then another. Their eyes met. They both smiled quick, guilty smiles. That night, she went to bed thinking, "She's not so bad." But the war in the adults' hearts would not allow peace in the children's. The next week, the wives had a terrible argument. Plates broke, voices rose, and the landlord even came to knock on the gate. After that, new rules were drawn more sharply. Her mother said, sitting her down and cupping her face with tired hands, "You are not to talk to that girl again. Do you hear me? Her mother hates us. And where there is hate, there is danger." "But she's my sister," she whispered. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "She is not your sister. She is a stranger who happens to share your father. That is all." On the other side of the courtyard, Sarah received a different version of the same poison. "You see that woman?" her mother said, pointing towards his house. "She wants everything we have. She took your father's money, his time, his attention. Do not go near her, child. They are not your people." And so two girls who might have grown up as best friends, confidants, and protectors became wary shadows in each other's lives. They learned to avoid each other's gaze at the well. They learned to pretend not to hear when their father called one to sit with him, and the other stayed behind. They learned that a shared bloodline meant nothing, when every adult around them insisted they were enemies. By the time they were teenagers, the distance between them felt like an ocean. She grew into a quiet, observant young woman. She helped her mother with the cooking, the cleaning, and the endless small sacrifices of a second wife who always seemed to be competing and losing. She watched her father age under the pressure of divided loyalties, flinching when he returned late from Sarah's house or stayed too long on their side, only to be summoned back by a sharp voice from across the courtyard. She told herself she would never live like that. She promised herself she would never share. When she was 22, she met Malik. He was tall, calm, and gentle, with a patience that drew her in instantly. They met at a cousin's wedding, where the music was too loud and the air too hot. She withdrew to the fringes of the celebration, and Malik followed, striking up an easy conversation about the food, the crowd, the ridiculousness of wedding photographers who took hundreds of pictures no one ever saw. For the first time in a long time, she laughed freely. Within months, they were engaged. Her mother wept with joy, hugging her daughter as if she were sending her off to a safer world. "Promise me you won't agree to be a second wife," her mother whispered. "If he ever speaks of another woman, leave. Don't live this life. Don't repeat my story." "I won't," she said firmly. "It will just be us." They married in a small, beautiful ceremony. Malik's family welcomed her kindly. Her father, worn and grayer than she remembered, gave her a blessing that trembled on his lips. "Make your own home," he told her. "Draw your own lines. Don't let anyone else write your story." For a while, that's exactly what she did. Her first year of marriage was peaceful. Malik listened. He asked about her day. They ate dinner together at the small table. They bought on credit, laughing about the strange neighbors in their building. Sometimes arguments flared over bills or family obligations, but they always found their way back to each other by nightfall. Then slowly, life crept in with its heavier demands. Malik lost a job and found another that kept him out late. His longings for a child grew heavier as month after month passed with no pregnancy. The doctor said everything looked fine, but fine didn't fill the empty crib they had optimistically bought and placed in the spare room. Worse, Malik's extended family began to talk. "You've been married almost 3 years," his aunt said one afternoon, sipping her tea. "No child yet? Sometimes it's not the man, you know. Have you considered?" He cut her off sharply, but the damage was done. The idea had been planted, like a poisonous seed. Around this time, Sarah's life took a different turn. Her mother had always pushed her to aim higher, to prove their side of the family was superior. She studied accounting and got a respectable office job. She moved out of the compound into a small apartment across town, declaring she was done with village dramas and backyard wars. On the surface, she seemed to have escaped, but the bitterness she'd been fed all her life, stories of how her mother had been wrong, how the other wife had stolen what was hers, had seeped deep into her bones. She carried it with her like an invisible inheritance, shaping the way she saw other women, other marriages, other homes. She first met Malik at a church program her colleague invited her to. He helped organize the event, moving between rows of chairs, checking on the sound system, smiling politely at everyone. He was introduced to her as Bro Malik, one of the faithful ones, always helping. She noticed his wedding ring, of course. She also noticed the way he spoke about his wife when someone asked. She's fine," he said once, almost distractedly. "She's at home." There was no boastful warmth, none of the adoration she'd expect from a newly married man. Just a flat statement, as if she were a piece of furniture waiting in a quiet room. Something tugged at Sarah then. Not desire at first, curiosity. Who is this woman? Why does he talk as if she's far away, even when she's just across town? Weeks turned into months. The program became a regular thing, and Malik and Sarah ended up working on committees together. They exchanged phone numbers for coordination purposes. They began to text about schedules, planning logistics. Then, as is so often the case, the line between duty and intimacy blurred by inches, not leaps. "How was your day?" slipped into the messages between them. "Are you home yet?" came next. "Are you okay? You seem quiet today," followed. One evening, they sat side by side after a long planning session, the hall nearly empty. Malik ran a hand over his face and sighed. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked. He hesitated. "It's just things at home." "It's nothing." She waited. Silence did the rest. Finally he said, "We've been trying to have a child. It's not happening. The pressure, the questions, it's getting to her. To us. Sometimes it feels like we barely talk about anything else." Sarah let the words sit between them. She had grown up watching a man divided between two homes. She knew what pressure looked like. But she also knew the silence of wives who swallowed their pain and sat quietly while men's hearts wandered elsewhere. "That must be hard," she said softly. He nodded, eyes downcast. "I love her. But Latelish is always sad, always tense. I don't blame her. I just..." His voice trailed off. Sarah placed a hand on his arm, a gesture that should have been harmless, but between two lonely people. "I understand," she murmured. "You're carrying a lot." In that moment, something shifted. She knew it. He knew it. Neither pulled away. At home, Sarah replayed the conversation in her mind. Malik's tired eyes, his loneliness, his restrained frustration. A dangerous thought rose within her like smoke. I could make him happy. I wouldn't drown him in problems. I could give him peace. The thought should have stopped there. Instead, it made her feel powerful. Growing up, she had watched her mother fight for scraps of affection, always blaming the other woman for the gaps in her life. Now here she was, on the opposite side of the story, with the chance to be the one who was chosen. When Malik messaged her late one night, saying, "Thank you for listening today. I don't have many people I can talk to," she replied faster than she meant to. "You deserve someone who understands you." He didn't answer right away, but the seed had been planted. The following weeks were a slow, deliberate descent. They began to meet accidentally after programs ended, lingering in the parking lot while others went home. Their conversations grew more personal. His childhood, her complicated family, the polygamous house she had left behind. "That must have been terrible," he said once, genuinely moved. "Growing up like that, it taught me something," Sarah said, her gaze steady. "If you don't fight for what you want, someone else will take it." He shifted uncomfortably, but didn't challenge her. She knew he was married. She knew somewhere in a small apartment, there was a woman who washed his clothes, cooked his meals, waited for his texts. a woman lying awake and counting the hours until he came home. She also knew that woman was her father's other daughter, but years of being told she is not your sister had done their work. When his name came up in conversation, it triggered not solidarity, but a dark satisfaction. When Malik mentioned it offhand one day, everything clicked. Your wife's name is Shah? She asked sharply. Yes, he said, frowning a little. Why? What's her father's name? He told her. Silence fell. Sarah's heart pounded. She saw it in a flash, the dusty courtyard of her childhood, the two houses, the invisible line, the girl on the low wall, sharing roasted corn. The years of being told, she is not your sister. She is the reason we suffer. Everything in her stiffened. So you're married to she almost choked on the word. Her. He watched her, confused. Do you know her? Sarah's mind raced. A part of her wanted to laugh at the cruelty of it all. Another part of her wanted to scream. Of all the men in the world, fate had led her credo the door of the very woman she had been raised to resent. Yes, she said slowly. We grew up in the same compound. Oh, he said, relieved. Then you know how reserved she can be. Sarah nodded, but said nothing more. That night, she couldn't sleep. She thought of Sh's soft eyes, the way she had once shyly taken a bite of her corn. She thought of her mother's fury, the way she had been taught to measure her worth against that other woman's shadow. She thought of all the years she had spent trying to prove her side of the family was stronger, better, more deserving. And now here she was, with the power to touch the life she had built, one thing she had that had nothing to do with the war of their parents. Jealousy rose in her, fierce and hot. Why does she get a husband who loves her? Why does she get a chance at the life my mother begged for and never had? The next time she saw Malik, she made a choice. She laughed more loudly at his jokes. She brushed against him accidentally. She let her gaze linger a little too long. She sent messages at midnight. When loneliness is loudest, are you still awake? Thinking of you. You deserve better than silence when you get home. He resisted at first. This is wrong, he tapped one night. I know, she replied. Then why does it feel like the only honest part of our lives? They deleted the conversation, then started a new one. She noticed the change long before she knew the cause. Malik's phone, once left casually on the table, now never left his pocket. He smiled at things she had not said. He left the house early for meetings and returned smelling of someone else's perfume, though he insisted it was from the office. One evening, as they sat down to eat, his phone buzzed. His eyes flicked to the screen and softened in a way she hadn't seen in months. Who is it? She asked, trying to sound casual. Just work, he said too quickly. Screen turned face down. The lie sat there between them, cold and heavy. Weeks later, the truth arrived not through confession, but through coincidence. She was visiting her father, who had fallen ill and stayed longer than usual at the old compound. As she left in the late afternoon, she decided to stop by a nearby cafe to buy snacks before heading home. She stepped inside and froze. At the back of the cafe, Malik sat at a corner table, his hand intertwined with another woman's. Their heads were close, their bodies angled toward each other like people with something to hide. The woman laughed at something he said, her hand lightly brushing his cheek. She knew that laugh. It had once echoed across the courtyard of her childhood. Sarah, for a moment, she couldn't breathe. He flipped the switch. The light revealed a woman he scarcely recognized, calm, composed, eyes too steady to be anything but broken. Where were you? She asked. He opened his mouth to lie. Then something in her gaze stopped him. At a meeting, he said anyway. At a cafe? His heart stuttered. And was Sarah there too? The name hit him like a blow. How do you? I saw you, she said quietly. I saw you holding her hand. I saw you look at her the way you used to look at me. I didn't know, he stammered. But she knew, she replied. She knew exactly who I was when she took your hand. The next day, she went to see Sarah. She requested the address from a cousin and took 3 buses across town, her heart pounding the entire way. When Sarah opened the door and saw her standing there, her face went pale, then hardened into something almost defiant. She said flatly, "What are you doing here?" "I came to ask you a question," she replied. Her voice trembled, but she held her chin high. "Why?" Sarah's lips tightened. "You'll have to be more specific." "Why him?" Tears filled his eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Of all the men in the world, why would you choose mine? You knew who I was. You knew what this would do to me." Something ugly flickered across Sarah's face, hurt, jealousy, resentment, all tangled together. "You think you're the only one who's been hurt?" She shot back. "You think your mother was the only one who cried at night? We grew up in the same war, Sha. I watched my mother beg for scraps of affection while your side walked around like the victims. I swore I would never be the one left waiting, the one watching everything from the window. And that justifies this? She whispered. Hurting me? Hurting another woman your own blood? My blood? Sarah scoffed. You were never my sister. That's what they made clear from the beginning, isn't it? You stayed on your side. I stayed on mine. Don't come to me now talking about family. She looked at her for a long moment. I tried to be your sister, she said softly. You were the one who turned away. Silence filled the room. For a split second, something in Sarah's expression cracked. The little girl on the low wall flickered through a girl who once shared roasted corn and a shy smile. But the years of taught hatred, the weight of her mother's bitterness, pressed that image down, burying it under layers of self-defense. What do you want from me? Sarah asked quietly. Nothing, she replied. I just wanted to see your face when I asked you why. I wanted to know if there was any part of you that would regret it, that would say, I went afar. Sarah swallowed. I wanted a life where I wasn't second best, she said finally. For once, I wanted to be chosen. You weren't chosen, she said gently, the tears finally spilling over. You were used to fill a void he should have brought to me, and I was betrayed by two people who should have been my safe place and me husband, and the only sister I will ever have. She turned to go. Sarah called after her, voice cracking. Wait. She paused in the doorway, but didn't turn around. Sarah struggled for words that had never been given to her, only stolen. I didn't realize how much of our mother's fight I was still carrying. I thought hurting you would heal something in me. It didn't. It just spread the rot. She closed her eyes. Our mother's war ended their happiness, she said. Now it has ended mine too. I won't let it touch the rest of my life. When she got home, she packed a small bag. Malik watched, panic rising in his throat. Please, he begged. We can fix this. It was a mistake, no, she said, looking at him with a calmness that chilled him. Cheating is a mistake. Repeated messages, hidden meetings, months of lies, that's a decision. And you made it over and over. I love you, he whispered. If this is your love, she replied, then I don't want it. She thought of her mother's plea. Don't live my life. Don't repeat my story. She thought of her father's words. Make your own home. Draw your own lines. For the first time, she understood what both of them meant. I'm not staying to compete, she said quietly. I grew up watching your kind of love tear people apart. I won't do it again. She left that night with nothing but a small bag, a cracked heart, and a painful clarity. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled, but the scars remained. Malik tried to reach her. She blocked his calls. Her father, weary and ashamed, apologized for a past he could not change and a present he had not seen coming. Her mother wept for the second time in her life over a marriage destroyed by another woman, but this time, the woman was someone tied to them by blood. As for Sarah, she got what she thought she wanted. For a brief, intoxicating period, Malik clung to her in his guilt and loneliness. But a love built on betrayal and broken trust has its own disease. Every argument ended with the same question hanging in the air. If you could do this to her, what will stop you from doing it to me? There was no answer that could bury that doubt. In the end, no one truly won. The old war between their mothers had birthed a new one in the next generation, twisting to girls who should have held each other's hands into strangers who tore each other's lives apart. This is how division works in many polygamous homes, not just in contracts and sleeping schedules, but in the quiet, slow poisoning of children who are taught to hate their own reflection. Years later, people would look at Shah and say, she left her husband and never remarried. They would look at Sarah and say, she had a chance at love and still ended up alone. They would shake their heads and talk about curses and bad luck. But beneath those whispers was a deeper truth. When families teach their children war, those children grow up and destroy not only each other, but themselves. And sometimes, the worst betrayal doesn't come from a stranger. It comes from the sister who was never allowed to be one. Follow me for more